Welcome back to National Reporters. You take a live look here at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. President Biden, along with House Speaker Mike Johnson and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, are set to deliver remarks on anti-Semitism.
The remarks are a part of the museum's annual Day of Remembrance ceremony. President Biden delivering the keynote address. We have a live look inside here once the ceremony begins, where we hear from the congressional leaders, obviously the president himself as well. We'll bring that to you live. Let's bring in Thane Rosenbaum, a distinguished professor at Touro University. We also have Matt Lieberman, the publisher of the Lieberman Files, and Tom Borelli, Newsmax contributor, joining us live. Thank you all for being here. Matt, we haven't heard from you today. Let's start with you if we can. Cameras there within this, again, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's annual Day of Remembrance ceremony, as the color guard gathers here and enters into the room. Someone has already kicked off here, but again, many are waiting for the minority leader to speak, the House Speaker to speak, the president, both sides of the aisle. Will they be united in the same message, Matt?
I feel they will be united in the same message, but it will be interesting to see what, for example, Speaker Johnson says, and I believe the content and energy of his speech will hold Biden to the fire for giving a strong, unequivocally anti-Semitism speech. This is no time for wishy-washy, back and forth kind of, yes, we can't have discrimination against this group, but let's think about all groups. The target in America now, above and beyond any target, is Jews, is Jewish people, is the group of people who in recorded history have been the victim of the single greatest mass atrocity slaughter of all time, the Holocaust. And it is no time, and I say this, I live up near Columbia University, actually, within a few blocks. I'm a big guy, 6'4", around 210. It's not comfortable walking around there. One reason it's not comfortable, it's not just all the crazy protesters speaking awful, disgusting violence against Israel and against Jews. It's the fact that for too long, and this is all across the country, law enforcement just watches it happen. And if there's a physical altercation against someone who's there on behalf of Israel, law enforcement just lets it happen. I'd love to hear Biden say that the law enforcement people in the United States and whatever the federal government can do will be done to point law enforcement towards cracking down on these people who are frankly beating up Jews and calling for their death. It's intolerable.
Yeah, and of course, as we've discussed, Thane, a clear violation of the First Amendment. When you go from free speech to direct threats to a certain group of people, potentially calling for violence against a certain group of people, and also, as we've seen, property destruction, we've seen resisting arrest, a number of things that some of these protesters have experienced and brought upon themselves. And could this be a moment for these congressional leaders to call it out directly? You know, Mike Johnson actually visited Columbia's campus here, but we haven't seen that from the president.
No, you're right, Emma. Look, we need presidential moral leadership at this. Today, if today is celebrating, honoring Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, it's also called the Day of Rage among the people that are protesting. The Day of Rage is the language of terrorists, not students. And our country has already outlawed terrorism. We have anti-terrorism laws. And yes, all sorts of laws have been already broken. Trespassing, unlawful assembly, breaking and entering, destruction of property, assault, resisting arrest. Why are they still walking the streets? Look, the First Amendment, I've been a law professor for 30 years. My last book was on free speech. Let me just give the Newsmax audience a simple tutorial. The founding fathers never enshrined a First Amendment right to free speech in the Bill of Rights for death to Jews, death to America. Go back to Poland. Hamas, we are Hamas. These were enlightened men of the 18th century. They believed in civilized debate and representative democracy, and that the discussion of ideas leads to better society and governance. None of this is protected under the First Amendment. All of it is excluded. It's fighting words, it's true threats, it's incitement of violence. Supreme Court precedent is very clear. If law professors were less anti-Semitic, they would tell you that. But they would just tell you what I just said. The First Amendment protects none of this, and we've allowed it to go on. And now's the time. This is a big moment for President Biden. Remember when Obama was running for president, he made a speech on racism in Philadelphia? This can be his moment. He won't, in my view, he will fail, because he's terrified of the squad, and he's terrified of Dearborn, Michigan.
You're entitled to your thought, your opinion on that. Again, just recently it was pointed out during an interview that the president will now focus on quality over quantity. His speeches will be shortened. So even still, does that apply to today? Tom Borelli, your thoughts. We'll close up.
Yeah, I expect Biden to give a vanilla speech today, probably playing both sides. He needs to come out strong as a leader. I think Mike Johnson, Speaker, will come out much stronger. At the end of the day, the universities are a problem. students are being taught propaganda. For every one of these students who happens to be arrested or breaking the law, they should have a choice. They either go to stay in jail or they watch one of those horrific videos, what happened to those Jewish people in Israel, the brutality. Let them watch that and let them come out and see what side they're on.
That, again, very interesting point. You know, you wonder in a lot of these instances if the protesters really know what's going on, perhaps even what they're protesting, which river, which sea they're describing here. They're unable to answer questions. Instead, they hide behind masks and they point you to some sort of media liaison who also doesn't have answers.
They want to bring in, after that, Professor Thane Rosenbaum, who's been standing by and listening as well. Tom Borelli, your thoughts as well. You've listened to Speaker Johnson. Now, this is continuing as we're waiting President Biden to speak. Your thoughts, Tom Borelli?
Well, I thought it was a fantastic speech, and he said at times like this, we must be graphic, meaning you need to educate everybody in the United States, even the protesters, of the horrific happenings that happened in that attack on October 7th against innocent civilians, period. But what's the bigger picture here is we must understand that this is not happening by accident. There is big, big money funding these protests, and a lot of these money are coming from Biden donors. That's right, Biden donors. So the Democrats here have accountability of why they are funding groups like this. If all Americans don't stand up for Jews today, we will be next. The bell will toll for everyone. This is not just an attack against Jewish people. This is an attack against America and American values. It's time to unite, and that's what President Biden needs to do, but we're not going to get it.
Are moments away, we believe, from hearing from the president directly, and we will stop our discussion and we will listen in to the president then. But Matt, you know, this has become politicized, it seems, when it comes to folks who align themselves with different parties and how they view support for Israel. Just wanted to get your read on how potentially this could impact the November presidential election. Based on what we hear from President Biden today, could he perhaps lose some support within his own party based on some statements he might stand if he were to show a strong allyship with Israel?
Yeah, two things. First, to what Tom said. Yes, this is about all of us in America. You know, they're taking down American flags and trying to raise Palestinian flags. If you needed a more direct message that this is about all of us in the free world, you know, that's it. Politically, look, you know, I think Biden at his advanced age and not in great shape tells himself that he needs to run for president because he and he alone can defeat Donald Trump. We'll see if that's true or not. But I believe that is a conviction of his, and that's why he's doing it. And he probably feels that's a principled stance against Trump. However, he's got to ask himself, what is the principled stand he needs to take on this issue, this moral issue that spans the ages? And is he going to be willing, tragically, to sacrifice the Jewish people, Jewish safety, the state of Israel, for a handful of votes in Michigan in a few key swing states? What's it worth to him? And we're going to see that play out over the coming months.
Professor Thane Rosenbaum, we're being told that your parents are Holocaust survivors?
Yeah. They died many years ago. They both survived death camps in Poland. And many of my novels, fiction, deal with post-Holocaust themes. So I'm steeped in this, and I've spoken a number of times at the Holocaust Memorial Museum, where we're filming right now. I will say one thing about Speaker Johnson. He made the necessary connection between what we're seeing on the streets and the support for Israel. That, to me, was another example of moral clarity. He's saying, Israel is on the front lines on the war on terror. They're fighting the fight for us. How do we know that? Well, they just started burning American flags in Dearborn a few weeks ago. The Arab street has lit the match, and they're on the loose. And you're seeing it through universities and outside museums. It's not going to stop unless we put a stop to it. The nations throughout Europe have dealt with this problem for 20 some odd years, and we have been insulated from it until very recently. So it is very important to understand Israel is fighting terrorism. They have always been fighting terrorism. Their fight is a war, not a genocide. They're fighting people that argue and believe in genocide. And the people chanting on the streets are calling for genocide. It's all very twisted, which is why it was great that he made the connection between the anti-Semitism we're seeing in this country, and here's a really good remedy. Support Israel, root for Israel, unshackle Israel, and let them finish the job.
We have some sound, in case you missed it and are just tuning in now, from what Speaker Mike Johnson had to say at the Holocaust Memorial Museum's Annual Day of Remembrance. Our control room, you can choose if we wanted to address the speaker. He spoke on the college campus protests that we've seen. Here's some of that sound.
We're witnessing American universities quickly becoming hostile places for Jewish students and faculty. The very campuses which were once the envy of the International Academy have succumbed to an anti-Semitic virus. Students who were known for producing academic papers are now known for stabbing their Jewish peers in the eyes with Palestinian flags. Faculty who once produced cutting-edge research are now linking arms with pro-Hamas protesters and calling for a global intifada. Administrators who were once lauded by their peers for leadership are now barring Jewish faculty.
You know, I think back to being in college myself. Sometimes you see, not to excuse the obviously horrific actions of some of these college kids, but you go with the crowd. You go with what's popular, and you know, being anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian at this point seems to be popular or trendy. But Rabbi, he called out the administration too. You have to think, who's the one who's really sending the message and teaching students about how to view what's going on in Israel today? I mean, this seems like obviously a much deeper-rooted issue happening at some of these Ivy League schools.
I'm, thank God, the proud father of 9 children. And in raising kids, the first thing that they have to know is that there's right and wrong and there's discipline. Can you imagine that these university administrations are sitting pretty pleasing all of these thugs, begging them, let's negotiate. If you give us back our campus, we will divest from Israel and make sure that it starves economically. And by the way, I just want you to know, these calls for divestment from Israel, they are also calls for the destruction of Israel. Because as Winston Churchill famously said in the Second World War, his great fear was not the German Air Force headed by Goering. His fear was the U-boats. Because if you starve a country, if the U-boats could close off all of the foodstuffs that were being brought into Britain, it would be starved into submission. So BDS is a call for Israel's annihilation. And you have university administrators who are negotiating with 20-year-old thugs. How embarrassing is that? The fact that Manoush Safik is still the president of Columbia is astonishing. She should have resigned a long time ago. She lost control of her entire campus. And like I said, yesterday's Met Gala, the NYPD took control in a second. How is it that to protect Kim Kardashian and Kylie Minogue, the NYPD is suddenly, and there are heroes, but they're suddenly activated? I'll tell you why, because the Met told them, if you don't shut this damn thing down, you're in big trouble. And NYPD did. Columbia or NYU or Fordham, all universities right near me are afraid to do just that. Mike Johnson is right. You see, there's only about 10 steps between the demonization of a nation and the gas chambers. There are 10 major steps. You begin with boycotting businesses. There's this subhuman. And what we need to do is stop it at the outset, at the subhuman dehumanization, and we need to see much more of that from university administrations.
All right, guests, stand by. Our panelists, we have been waiting for President Biden to come out. That is yet to happen. A speaker is still there. We're live in the room. Don't go too far.